Takaichi's gambling dissolution of the Japanese National Assembly.
You know, one minute it's business as usual in Japanese politics. The next, a massive, high-stakes gamble is suddenly on the table. Japan has been thrown into a snap general election, and we are going to break down the strategy, the fallout, and exactly why this political chess move matters to every single one of us. So this is the big question, right? Why now? I mean, the current government isn't even halfway through its term. So calling an election out of the blue like this is a huge political risk. Let's dig into the timing. And get this, with cabinet approval ratings soaring over 70%, this move by Prime Minister Takaichi feels less like a desperate Hail Mary and more like a really calculated risk from a position of strength. So what's the game plan here? We're going to explore the government's official story, the really fierce backlash from critics, and the very real consequences this political maneuvering could have on your daily life. Okay, first things first, let's get grounded in the basic facts. What exactly just happened, and why is the timing of all this so important? The House of Representatives has been dissolved, and that triggers an election on February 8th. The timeline is incredibly tight. We're talking just 16 days from the announcement to voting day. That makes it the shortest campaign Japan has seen since the end of World War II. It's also the first time in 36 years that voters will be heading to the polls in the middle of winter, which puts this immense pressure on every party to get moving, like right now. And this is where things get really interesting, because this decision is a huge flip-flop. Less than 2 months ago, back in December, Prime Minister Takaichi was crystal clear that fighting inflation was her top priority. She literally said she had no time to think about dissolving the Diet. And then this week, she did exactly that. So what on earth changed? So what's the official story? What's the government's reasoning for such an abrupt and, frankly, massive decision? Let's take a look at the scenario they're pitching to the public. The Prime Minister is framing this whole thing as a direct appeal to the people. By asking the sovereign people to decide, she's trying to position this not as some cynical political maneuver, but as an act of democratic duty. The message is pretty clear. She wants a powerful new mandate straight from the voters to legitimize her leadership and her vision for the country. And you can see why they're feeling so confident about making this appeal. Their cabinet approval rating is sitting pretty at over 70%. That high level of public support is basically the wind in their sails, and it's what makes this a calculated risk they think they can actually win. So here's the pitch they're making to voters. They're running under this big slogan, "Make the Japanese archipelago strong and prosperous." And they're dangling a pretty major policy promise to speed up talks on a 2-year suspension of the consumption tax on food. The end goal here is simple. Use their popularity in this key promise to win an outright single-party majority in the lower house. But as you can imagine, not everyone is buying it. In fact, experts and opposition figures are sounding some serious alarms, and they're questioning both the timing and the real motives behind this whole thing. Political economic critic Koga Shigeyaki says this election puts party politics way ahead of people's needs. He's arguing that by hitting pause on the normal functions of government, this move is all about strengthening the ruling LDP's power base, not about helping citizens who are really struggling with rising prices right now. Former Foreign Minister Tanaka Makiko has an even more cynical take. She suggests this whole election is basically a giant smokescreen, a way to quickly hit the reset button on the political conversation and bury some brewing scandals about politics and money and controversial ties to the Unification Church before any of that can start to chip away at their high approval rating. And then you have opposition leader Yamamoto Taro, who doesn't mince words at all. He says this isn't about the people, period. In his view, it's a move made purely for political self-preservation, arguing that the ruling party is calling an election now simply to save their own jobs. Okay, so beyond all the political back and forth, how does this decision actually affect the daily lives of regular people? This is where the politics gets personal. International economist Hamano Riko is warning about a potential horror scenario. She's afraid that if the government wins a strong mandate, their plans for aggressive spending could actually overheat the economy, speed up inflation, and end up hurting household budgets, making the gap between the haves and the have-nots even wider. And it's not just some future possibility. There are real immediate consequences. Think of it like a domino effect. Calling an election pauses normal government functions. That freezes the super important national budget talks, which then delays the very inflation relief measures that so many people are counting on. On top of the economic stuff, the timing is just chaotic. The election period lands squarely in the middle of university entrance exam season, which adds this incredible amount of stress for students. It's also a major challenge for voters in snowy regions. And when the chief cabinet secretary suggested students could just use early voting, it sparked a huge wave of online criticism from people who felt the government was completely out of touch. And let's not forget the price tag for all this disruption and political maneuvering. According to former Minister Tanaka Makiko, the estimated cost to hold this one election is a staggering 70 billion yen. That's taxpayer money. So all of this brings us to the final and most important question. With so much on the line, what is the fundamental choice that voters are now facing? When you boil it all down, this election has really become a clash of two totally different stories. On one side, you have a popular government asking for an even stronger mandate to build a strong and prosperous Japan, and on the other, you have critics warning that this is just a self-serving gamble, a costly distraction that will delay real help for citizens and mess up their lives. The choice now rests with the voters. As this super-fast campaign kicks into high gear, the question for everyone is, what's your deciding factor going to be? Is it the promise of strong leadership and a potential tax cut, or is it the warnings about political priorities and their very real-world consequences? The country's direction is hanging in the balance.